Hello, everybody. Monsignor Ritchie once again for our Tuesday session of questions and answers coming from St. Patrick's Cathedral here in New York City, America's Parish Church. And I'm very happy to announce that we have so many questions that came in between last Tuesday and last night that I had to divide them into two parts. And so if your question was sent in, but it's not done, it will be done next week because we just got so many. Probably giving my email address was an easier way of getting many more people to send in questions. Remember, when I stand here and give you the answer, I give it as a parish priest, the rector of St. Patrick's Cathedral, but as not a person that's infallible. I'm not the Pope, I'm not the Archbishop, and I'm giving you my understanding of the answer to the questions that people raise. Now, sometimes people will say, well, Father, I don't agree with that, and that's okay. But I'm just prefacing everything by just saying, remember, this is me giving the opinion about the questions. I've been a priest for 49 years, so I have a lot of experience. So I should be able to give a true answer, but I'm not infallible. Okay, here we go. First question today. A question from a lady who wants to know, my husband and I have been sacristans, extraordinary ministers of Holy Communion, and my husband is an instituted acolyte, which is very good. Thank you for your service. And the question is, where is the tabernacle at St. Patrick's Cathedral? It's a very interesting question. The tabernacle is in the very back of the cathedral in the Lady Chapel, dedicated to our Blessed Lady. In traditional cathedrals, very often the tabernacle where the Blessed Sacrament is reserved is in a special chapel or a special part. If you go to Rome and go to St. Peter's Basilica, you'll find that the tabernacle is in a special room made especially for adoration and for prayer. Places like St. Patrick's has so many people walking around all the time that it would be inappropriate to have the tabernacle in a place that would be passing by so many people so often. So the tabernacle is in the very back of the church in the Lady Chapel. There'll be more about that because there's a few more questions like that. This is from California. I enjoy listening to your Q&A session every Tuesday, learning about the cathedral and topics of our Catholic faith. Today, you helped me by providing your email address. I've been unable to find a place in the website to ask a question. So here's the two questions from our California listener. What determines which Eucharistic prayer, 1, 2, 3, or 4, is said at Mass? Well, that's really the determination of the person who is the celebrant of the Mass, the priest or the bishop or the cardinal or the pope who celebrates the Mass makes the choice of which of the Eucharistic prayers to use. So it's up to the celebrant is the answer to that question. I so enjoy hearing the Kyrie sung in Latin at the Masses at St. Patrick's Cathedral. Would Sanctus, Sanctus, Sanctus ever be sung instead of Holy, 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 or Agnus Dei instead of Lamb of God? Well, first of all, it's a very common mistake that many people make, but the Kyrie is not Latin, it's Greek. Kyrie eleison, Christe eleison, Lord have mercy, Christ have mercy. And the music department basically determines on a yearly basis which hymns we're going to sing, which hymns are most appropriate for which certain days and solemnities and feasts and all of the celebrations that we have. During the month of October every year, we make a conscious effort to have all of the proper parts or the common parts of the Mass, Kyrie, Sanctus, Agnus Dei, and even the acclamation after the consecration, to be sung in Latin. So during the month of October, if you are listening to our live stream, you'll hear a lot more Latin than during the rest of the year. During the year, again, we put Latin parts of the Mass, and we even put Spanish parts of the Mass, at least in the singing. But there's a question about that. I'll get back to that later. And this very, very cute addition saying, thank you for making it possible for so many people to virtually attend the beautiful services celebrated at St. Patrick's Cathedral. It is the perfect way for me to start my day. What a gift, what a blessing. I watch Mass in my back garden every morning, and I'm usually joined by hummingbirds visiting the feeders. So that's a great understanding, or a great blessing we have. And she showed me a picture of her hummingbirds in her backyard. So I'm glad we provide a liturgical celebration for hummingbirds. Could you please share some of the history and details about the beautiful crucifix that adorns the wooden background of the elevated pulpit at St. Patrick's? It almost looks like it might be carved ivory. And this is from, it doesn't say where he's from. So it's a very interesting question. I don't know if the camera could point to the crucifix that we have up in the pulpit. When I first came here, I realized that we wouldn't use the pulpit that often. Now, in the beginning, in my first years here, I used to be at the pulpit very often, but eventually I decided to preach from the rug. When Cardinal Dolan came, he preached from the pulpit also, but eventually he came and he preaches from the rug also. On special occasions, he will go up to the pulpit and preach from there. So my experience was, I didn't know, there's a crucifix right there now, and we always had a crucifix there. But one day I got a text from somebody and said, Monsignor, do you know that the crucifix that you have in your pulpit is broken? And I said, that couldn't be true. So I went to the pulpit and I found out that indeed that was true. The wood had been splintered or split somewhere. It was a beautifully wood-carved corpus of Christ on it, but it was damaged. And the fact that we went up there so not very often, I missed it completely. And so when I saw that, I said, oh, we have to do something about that. So in our gift shop, there is a beautiful, beautiful cross that I had admired for years. And I said, let me bring it to the pulpit and see if it's the right size. And sure enough, I brought it to the pulpit, and the cross that you see now is one that we've had there only for a few years. It's not carved ivory, it's alabaster. It's made in Italy, and so many things, religious articles are not made in Italy. Very often they're made somewhere else. But this one was made in Italy, and it's a beautiful piece, as you may be able to see from the cameras. We have it in our gift shop, and people have bought it and had it put in their homes. But I think it's a beautiful example of good Catholic art coming from Italy. Next question comes from Ohio. Tell us about the glass doors behind the altar. We see people walking through the doors and sometimes see traffic. Do these doors open to the street? No. The doors that you'll see if you look straight beyond the altar are the doors that we have installed about 6 or 7 years ago when we did the restoration of the cathedral. And one of the improvements that we had was installing a glass partition between the ambulatory, which is the walkway in the back of the altar, and the chapel, the Lady Chapel. And so we had a beautiful series of glass panels created in Germany for us, and we installed the doors. And a very interesting part of it, again, you'd have to come to New York and see it with your own eyes. If you did, you'd see that the glass goes from the floor up to about 12 feet, and that's where the doors are. And then it goes from that portion of the entrance all the way up to the roof of the Lady Chapel. The reason for that was that if we had the glass doors up only to 12 feet and free air above it, the idea of keeping everything much more quiet and solemn would have been lost completely. The interesting or difficult situation for us was that nobody in America, as far as we could tell, made glass as big as what we needed for the Lady Chapel. So we had to go to Germany, and the glass was made there and transported over here by ship. And every day I would say my prayers, hoping that nothing happened to the ship, because glass is glass, and even though it's very, very thick, I was worried that something might have happened. But it didn't, thank God. And so we installed it, and we have a much quieter Lady Chapel than we've ever had in the history of the cathedral. So the reflection that people see is a reflection that comes from the inside of the church, and that's reflected on the glass. Tell us about the geothermal heat. When was it installed? It was installed a few years ago when we were doing the restoration of the cathedral, which began almost 10 years ago. We had to replace the heating and the air conditioning for the cathedral. And so we looked at a few different routes that we could go, and we came up with the understanding that if we did geothermal, which means digging wells into the earth and using the water that's down there and circulating it, it would be available for heating and for air conditioning. Again, it's a technical thing that an engineer would better explain than I can, but it's been working very, very well. If you were standing where I am right now, you'd know that the air conditioning is very fine, and it's done because of the geothermal process that we have. We dug 10 wells into the earth, going anywhere from 900 to 2,200 feet underneath St. Patrick's Cathedral, under the streets or this special area of Manhattan. And there we encountered the water, and we are circulating the water for the heating and the air conditioning. It's a great addition, I think, to keeping us a little bit greener than we ever were before. This beautiful lady comes in. When our church was still closed, you told us what closed churches meant to priests and asked us to touch base with them. We are close to our retired pastor, who, like you, has seen our family events unfold, but we hadn't talked to him. I did reach out to him and thank him. So that's a good result of the live streaming that we're doing. When I finally made it back to church and received the Eucharist for the first time in months, I was moved to tears. I didn't expect that emotion. It was my second First Communion. I think that's beautiful. I don't think this lady is alone in that reaction to coming back to the church after it had been closed for so long. From his iPad, my question: when there is a special Mass at the cathedral involving many priests and lay people, where do the participants in the procession assemble and vest? Is there a basement where they all meet? Yes, underneath or behind the altar, there's a stairway that goes down to our lower level, where we have all of the vestments for the priests and for visiting dignitaries. We have a large space down there where many priests can gather and put on their vestments. And so it's right underneath the main altar area, and we have another sub-basement down there too, where we keep vestments. Where is the sacristy located? If you look on my left shoulder, it's on my left side, all the way at the back of the behind the altar, to the side of the altar. That's where our sacristan. Are there bathrooms in the cathedral? Well, that's a very good question. When I first came here, I realized that we didn't have bathrooms in the cathedral. It was, when it was built, that was not part of the way churches were. Obviously, it's not that way anymore. So one of the things I said is, well, we should do something about that. Well, it took the restoration to prompt putting in bathrooms in the cathedral. So now we have one bathroom in the back of the altar next to the sacristy, and that's a handicapped available bathroom. And then below, when you go down the stairs into where the vestments are, there's a ladies' room and a men's room down there for the people in the cathedral. So when Pope Francis came to us in the year 2015, one of the things he said to His Eminence and to me, I guess, is he said, you must have angels coming to church at St. Patrick's, since you don't have any bathrooms. But well, I think we have a lot of angels, but that problem has been solved. Okay, please explain the differences between memorial, feast, and solemnity masses, and also please explain the optional memorials. In the celebration of the Eucharist that we have, the celebration of Mass, each day there's a book called the Ordo, and it indicates what feast day is to be celebrated, or what memorial is to be celebrated, or what solemnity is to be celebrated. Solemnities usually have to do with the mysteries of our Lord's birth, death, and resurrection, the solemnity of Christmas, the solemnity of Easter, the solemnity of the Ascension, the solemnity of St. Joseph is a solemnity also. Just recently, the church added St. Lawrence, who was a very early martyr, as a solemnity. Many of the feasts of the Blessed Virgin are solemnities. Now, a solemnity is a regular Mass, but it always has a Gloria and often has a creed celebrated in it, and it's a Mass celebrated with more solemnity than usual, which is indicated by its very name. A feast is a remembrance, usually of a saint, an important saint in the history of the Church. So each feast of the apostle, each apostle, when the day comes, is celebrated with a feast. Usually not a solemnity, but a feast. And a memorial is for many of the saints who have lived and died and been canonized saints. And so the memorial of certain of the saints will come on what we would naturally say, oh, it's the feast of Saint Bede. Well, it's really the memorial, but we kind of call it a feast. Interesting thing here at St. Patrick's Cathedral is that if you go anywhere in America on March 17th and you look at the Ordo, it says Memorial of St. Patrick. Now, because we are St. Patrick's Cathedral, ours is not a memorial, it's not a feast, it's a solemnity. And that's how we celebrate St. Patrick, with a solemn solemnity Mass. Okay. This lady says her daughter lives in Manhattan, and she hopes to visit and definitely will come to St. Patrick's Cathedral. I hope that's true of everybody who's listening. I'm starting to lose time. What is the history of the pipe organ? The organ that we have in the gallery now has been here since the early 1930s. The organ itself was built near St. Louis. It's a Kilgan organ, and it's been here since the early 30s. We have another organ in the back. We call it the chancel organ. That was here before the big one that we have in the back, and we use both of them. They both can be used simultaneously. So if you play the organ in the gallery, or you play the organ here in the sanctuary, you get the same amount of music coming from either of them. Does the church have any historical features that may not be readily known to the parishioners? Example, during the renovations, did you make any discoveries? Well, we didn't discover anything when we were doing the renovations or the restoration of the cathedral, except for the colors of the ceiling that we were not aware of because the place had been painted just one special color. But in the original building of St. Patrick's Cathedral, the ceilings were painted to look as if they were stone. And the other interesting things is, again, if you have to look at them with your own eyes, if you look at the decorations on the ceiling, they're called bosses, and it's just kind of symbols. The one that we discovered was that every single boss is different, and the second part of it is that each boss has an interior that's painted a red, like a cardinal red. We didn't know that, and that was part of the historical secrets that we discovered when we were doing the restoration. Just about myself, do you play any instrument or speak any other language? Well, I don't play any instruments. I wish I did. I speak Spanish. I've been involved in Spanish ministry since I was ordained a priest. I know a little Italian. I know a little German. I know a little French, but I can't speak any of them. But I can order on a menu usually. Two questions. Oh, yeah, this was asked of me before, but we never got around to it. We watch Mass every day, and it gives us a lot of strength and hope. We were wondering, on Sunday you seem to have the offertory hymn in Spanish, or it might be Latin. We were wondering why the music director would not have all the songs of the Mass in English. Well, part of it is that we have such a large Hispanic congregation in the Archdiocese of New York, and it's been part of our policy to include some Spanish in most of our bigger Masses. Number two, in the United States, it is said that, I might just read it. It is said that in each part of the world, the bishops of that part of the world determine the norms of Mass. Yes. For example, I think you mentioned in a recent Q&A that some parts of the world, the norm is that the bishop allows intinction, which is taking the sacred host and putting it into the chalice and then receiving the body and blood together because of intinction. Obviously, because of what's going on in the world, we don't do that anymore. I don't know if we'll ever get back to that. In some dioceses, the bishop has said he wanted everyone to stand after receiving communion, but in other dioceses we kneel. Well, the interesting reality is that in each diocese, the bishop is the official liturgist, the one that is in charge of making sure that the liturgy is done properly and is done according to the rules. But there are certain rules that are flexible. So the bishop of each diocese has the right to say to his people, this is how I want you to stand or kneel or receive when you're coming for Holy Communion. And some bishops do it one way. Most bishops do it exactly the same way, but some bishops do it different ways from others. If the church worldwide is one body in Christ, then why are not the norms of the church the same worldwide? Just like all realities of life, there in the world there are different approaches, there are different understandings. So the church certainly has norms that are absolutely necessary to be followed, but also has flexible norms in areas of life, even in liturgical life, that aren't as important to follow word for word or point by point. The first question I do not have an answer for. Sometimes due to medical scans, I can't wear the golden scapular. Is it true that what matters the most is the act of the imposition of the scapula? I don't know that answer. I'm sorry. May you explain the process for a blessed to become a saint, including the case of martyrs. Also, please, for the canonization of a non-martyr Catholic bishop. Well, as many people know, that when someone has died and has been a very famous famously holy person, not necessarily famous person, their cause for sainthood is sometimes started. It starts at the diocese where they lived or where they died. And so if the bishop of the diocese says, I think we should investigate this person's life, there will be an investigation, there will be a document presented and will be sent to Rome there's a congregation that deals with the canonization or the naming of saints. And if the congregation decides that this person is worthy of emulation and worthy of investigation to become a saint, they go through a process that begins with calling the person a servant of God. And then after some investigation and things look like they're going to progress further, that person is called a venerable. If, because of the popular devotion to that person who is now venerable, a miracle is deemed to have happened because of the intercession of that holy, venerable person, then and again, it takes a lot of investigating and a lot of studying of what happened in cases of whether or not something is a miracle. But if that is determined ultimately by the Holy Father, that the Venerable so-and-so had a miracle attributed to him or her, then that person becomes blessed. And that's a very special title, very, very difficult. Again, as time goes on, if the blessed person now comes with another miracle, then that's the call for that person to be called a saint, officially canonized in the church. So that's the process. It varies a little bit when someone dies for the faith, when they're martyrs. And again, if they have to have the obvious holiness of why they offered their lives. So sometimes when that happens, everything is short-circuited and they become blessed more quickly than they would have normally. Now I still have, look at all of these. So they'll be done next week with all of the others that I've received. Maybe I talk too much, So I thank you for all your Q&A. If you want to send any more, wait another week or so I can get through the 50 or 60 that I have received this week. Thank you. We'll have Mass in a few moments.